This episode of the podcast is brought to you by a new sponsor, Captivate.fm. Are you considering starting your own podcast? The first thing you are going to need is a podcast host. The podcast host I use and recommend is Captivate because they focus on growing your audience and show. Some of their features include unlimited podcasts and storage, web player calls to action, one-click sponsor kits, private feeds, promo links, link shorteners, detailed analytics, integrations, and more. Plans start at just $17 a month. Start your free 7-day trial at thesarahstjohn.com/getcaptivated. That's THESARAHSTJOHN.com/getcaptivated. Welcome to the Frugalpreneur Podcast. I am your host, Sarah St. John, and my guest today helps business owners leverage their LinkedIn presence to get leads and is the author of Build a LinkedIn Profile for Business Success. Welcome to the show, Daniel Alfon.
Thank you very much, Sarah St. John, the legend.
I don't know about that. Can you give us a little bit of background or your history and how you became a LinkedIn specialist?
With pleasure. It's not that I was raised and I told my parents I wanted to become a LinkedIn expert, but I signed up to LinkedIn early in 2004, and at one point I just realized it was a very powerful tool, and I started helping friends, entrepreneurs, who could find leads through LinkedIn. And at one point when I was a sales manager, I found that LinkedIn cut half the time I had to invest in order to close a deal. Just by finding the right person within the organization. Then those friends became entrepreneurs elsewhere, and they brought me up to train their sales force. And at one point, I just woke up and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Maybe I should do it properly. So it's a gradual process.
I've been actually thinking about LinkedIn a lot lately as far as how to use it to find leads. You know, LinkedIn is that social media platform that I think a lot of people just ignored for the longest time, but I feel like lately it's becoming more and more recommended or useful for business owners in particular as far as finding leads or connections. And now I've been using it a lot more. But I'm wondering, what is the best way to go about finding leads? Like in my particular situation, I recently launched a podcast production agency. I guess I could look for people who have a podcast already, but then maybe they already have a producer. Do I look for people who don't have a podcast yet and try to pitch them on launching one? I don't know. It's kind of I feel like it's a weird kind of category as far as how to find leads.
Maybe we can break it down into two parts. The first is why use LinkedIn at all. Okay, when I Google your name, I see in the top results your LinkedIn profile. Okay, it comes just after sarahstjohn.com. And it doesn't matter if you haven't visited for years. So we should take care of it as business owners or frugalpreneurs. Or the process I would suggest is start by asking yourself, when you think of Podsteam clients and Podsteam prospects, who's the ideal client you'd like to achieve, to target in real life? Say LinkedIn isn't you. Who would be your ideal client? Someone with a podcast, or someone thinking about having a podcast, or someone struggling with audio or video editing, or someone else?
I guess probably someone either thinking or planning to launch a podcast, because it's someone who hasn't thought about it or thinking about it. Then first you have to convince them to even have a podcast. So that's kind of another challenge. So probably someone who's kind of in the process of planning it, or someone who has started a podcast but is basically doing everything themselves and finding that it's a lot more time involved and technology involved than they had thought, and would like to pass that on to someone else.
So for the sake of our discussion, can we assume someone who started with podcast and has a number of chapters is the ideal client.
Yeah, probably someone who started and is managing it all on their own, but is finding it difficult to find the time for that.
If we were able to show those people your LinkedIn profile, what action would you like them to perform after they visit your profile?
Well, I guess go to the website and then schedule a call.
Is the Podsim website well represented in your profile today?
Where it has your name and then it says host of the Frugalpreneur podcast, but then under that it says Podsim.
When you look at your own profile, you see the banner on top of your profile image. There could be the name of your podcast or even the services that you offer. Instead of just host of the Frugalpreneur or Podsim podcast, could be helping podcasters publish podcasts without the audio and video hassle, or something like a pitch if they don't know about the service itself. In a conference and you would pitch your services, what slogan would you use?
Well, my slogan for Podsim is making podcasting as seamless as possible.
Sarah St. John, what you just told me is a better headline than what you currently have. So I would actually use it. It's much stronger. Every time you're not sure, just think of your ideal reader and ask yourself, is owner of a podcast more appealing than I make it easier? And if I make it easier is better, then use the headline, because the headline is the strongest real estate you have on your profile. And most entrepreneurs listening to us also tend to have, like, I'm co-founder of XYZ, or I'm CEO of ABC, but the name is not a household name. It's like we were advertising and would have a huge billboard with a name nobody knows. So it's up to us to really change it and use a slogan or something that is stronger. So the first question was, who's the ideal reader? So someone who has a podcast and struggles maybe with audio or video. And the second question would be, what would like that person, that ideal reader, to perform after he visited your profile? And that's to reach out. So you can help them reach out by making it easier for them to understand what services you offer. And basically it's just going to Podsim and taking the description and duplicating it on your LinkedIn profile, because it's not there.
Okay, so instead of saying you're the host of whatever podcast, you're the owner or founder of whatever company or whatever, actually put something in there that kind of describes what you do or how you can help people.
Excellent. How you help people is much stronger than ourselves. Nobody's interested in us, I'm sorry, but we have to think about the other side, other than maybe our mom. Or
that makes sense. Okay, so that's something I'm going to do today after this, is change that.
Excellent.
What other things can people do on their profile that would make it more appealing to get more leads?
Next, I would ask, which is the top link you would use for someone who needs your services but is not familiar with you or your company? Okay, that could be podsim.com. And there's a way on LinkedIn you can actually highlight that website in a more visual way. It just means going to your profile and then looking for ad section. I'm going to share my screen and or maybe we could do it the other way around. Use the website, and when we click on ad section, we'll look for featured, and then we select links. We paste the URL of podsim.com. We click on add, and within 20 seconds we see an image coming from the website. And that's a lot easier for our eye to notice. So I'm going to use it. Obviously, I'll go to my profile and I'll do it. We're looking for ad section over here. And when we click on ad section, we'll look for featured. That's the third on the list. And in this case, links. And once we click on links, we paste the URL of the website we'd like people to see. If LinkedIn found an image on Podsim, yeah, it found. I'm sorry. It took a second to see. This is a thumbnail of this would appear on a very prominent location on your profile. And you can even customize this, like Podsim, and then your slogan. So I'm not going to save this on my profile. So think about the link that would convert most of your ideal readers best. It could be your homepage. In some cases, it could be an actual podcast you recorded or republished. It could be a link from a summit. It could be an interview with Pat Flynn. It could be anything you think would convert most of those people. It could be a testimonial. And then just highlight the link on your profile. Anyone can take the name of the company and then Google it and then see what you offer. It's worthwhile to actually ask yourself, what are the best resources I would like those people to see? And nobody likes to work very hard, and it's our responsibility as entrepreneurs or solopreneurs to just show them, and that increases their chances of visiting the link, going to a website, and then knocking and saying, you know what, Sarah, I find it too difficult to edit the audio part of my podcast. Could you help me with that? Or could you provide me with help about video editing or anything else?
Okay. Wow. I didn't even know you could customize your LinkedIn profile like that. And then one thing I've been thinking about doing, the header image on my page, it shows the podcast. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if I should change it to the business, or if there's a way to create an image that shows both of them without it seeming like overkill. How to do it to where it makes sense.
It's possible to create an image that shows both. Desktop readers would probably see it well. We have to take into account that mobile readers, people using the LinkedIn app, will see a very small thumbnail. So if the text is long and complex, most people will not be able to see it. But if you can think of two images, like one with a mic and second with something else, maybe that could even translate into people using the app.
Do you know if the majority of LinkedIn users use it primarily through the app or through a desktop?
Before LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft, they used to publish every quarter the figure, and the last figure I remember was 57 mobile users. I imagine it's gone up. People would visit you and in some cases they would dive into it later using a desktop. But at first, if someone mentioned Sarah St. John when I was listening to a podcast, and I have my smartphone here, I would just check it out very quickly and then maybe go to read it more carefully. So it's best to also take into account the mobile users.
Yeah, because I know with pretty much all the other social platforms that I'm sure is predominantly mobile, but I was thinking with LinkedIn it might be kind of, maybe when they're at work or something, they might have LinkedIn open on their desktop. Some people have said that that's the only social platform that some companies allow their employees to even be on when they're at work. But 57%, that's still a majority, but it sounds like there's still quite a few people who use the desktop. But yeah, keeping in mind images for mobile would be the better approach. And then, so if you keep that in mind, but then when it's on a desktop, how would that look though? I guess mine, the one I currently have, shows up okay on both.
Okay, the ideal banner would look good on both mobile and desktop. And what happens when we double check? It looks fine on mobile. We have to take into account that the left part of the banner will be hidden by our profile photo. So your profile photo will actually hide or obfuscate what happens on the lower left side. And on mobile, I can't see the first word. Like the word business is cut and the word with is a bit cut. But you can play with it a bit and resize the images so it looks fine on both. It looks great on desktop. It looks good on mobile.
I just kind of mess with it and see. Yeah, when I create the new image, I can do that. I guess with the new image, it should be maybe pausing predominantly, and then maybe something about the host of podcast smaller.
Let me make a parallel with some of the podcasts that could use your services. Some people could have a day job and then, start having a gig with, and it's very difficult for many people to actually choose, to prioritize and say, everyone wants to promote everything. Trouble is that if you try to promote more than one thing, most of people can't even, visualize it, can't even go deeper. So whenever we can prioritize and say, right now for the next quarter, I'd like to promote Potsing, and then I could decide whether I switch. It's much easier to change your banner from Potsing to Sugarpreneur than to try to cater to both audiences in one short.
Okay, so maybe have two banners that I kind of switch back and forth between. Other than people finding me and coming to my page and seeing that I produce podcasts and whatnot, are there ways to cold outreach on LinkedIn? But then how would I know who to pitch in this particular situation? Because if I had some other business that was specific towards let's say landscapers. I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind. That would be easy to kind of search for and find. But this is I guess I could search for the word podcast or podcast host or something like that. But beyond that, I'm not sure how.
Okay, so I'll try to mention quickly a few ways for you to start reaching out to people, have them reach out to you. One of the easiest ways after your profile has been optimized with a new image and everything is to visit podcasters' profiles on LinkedIn being public. Okay, so there's a setting when you on desktop, when you click on your thumbnail on the top navigation bar, you have a settings and privacy, and then visibility on the left, and then on profile viewing options, you select Sarah St. John. From that moment, any profile you visit, and you could visit dozens of podcasters by running a simple search around Dallas or whatever you like, they have the ability to check without paying LinkedIn necessarily to see who visited their profile. And one of the 5 results LinkedIn will show free users is Sarah St. John. And if the headline is interesting, they're now one click away from discovering you. So that's one engine, just to visit people publicly, not just people, your ideal clients, your ideal prospects, podcasters, just to visit them publicly. You would have a view back rate of many of them discovering your services. Some of them might find the timing is great because they find the editing part too difficult for them, and they will be able to reach out. So that's one. If you connected with people you know well, by running a search, you could find a very interesting prospect that has a mega podcast or a series of podcasts, and if you see next to their name, if it says second, it means that you and them share at least one mutual connection. If you connect with people you know well, maybe we'll touch on that subject later, you can actually ask that person for an introduction. And even if you don't do that, the host looking you up would see that you have, say, Mark Guberti as a mutual connection. Now, if they reach out to Mark Guberti and Mark says, Sarah who? We're in trouble. They say, hey, I had a chat with Sarah the other day and she asked me very tough questions. Yeah, I think you two should talk. So the second thing to do would be to leverage your actual network by asking for an introduction or leveraging the people you're already connected with. The third axis could be sharing your services, or even better, informations for podcasters in LinkedIn groups about podcasting. A ton of groups about podcasting, and if you think about the podcaster you'd like, then some of them may have joined those groups. And it doesn't have to be necessarily your content. If you found a very powerful article, you could actually share that within 1 or 2 groups, and some people would appreciate the article and check the St. John lady, and then discover your services. If you do it consistently, even in smaller group, it could be a nice way of getting inbound leads. You could also leverage LinkedIn Advanced Search to find people who publish articles about podcasts. Some of them could be JV partners, some of them could be guests, some of them could be affiliates, some of them could be someone you could tag or mention or reach out to. So my recommendation would not be to go cold and not to use cold outreach first, because there are many, many ways to leverage good content and your network and your profile without just knocking and say, that's the service I provide. This is the least efficient way, I'm afraid, with most people.
Okay, I like those suggestions. So just clicking on someone's profile, because I know I'll get alerts saying so-and-so viewed your profile. Sometimes it'll tell me who, and other times it'll say someone viewed your profile, and then I think with those ones you have to pay or something to see who it was. But just clicking on people's profiles and they get that alert. I haven't gone to any groups yet, so that would be another good way, like you said, sharing tips and articles and whatnot, and not in your face way, or like you said, like not knocking on doors, but to where people at least become familiar with you, or at least check out your page and see what you're all about and stuff. So I like those suggestions. The second connection thing, that's also I've heard that before, the focus on second connections versus even necessarily first or third.
They could introduce you or mention your name or go back to the person and ask them about the services, and they would be able to get back to you and say, those people struggle with the transcriptions. Is this something you actually do? Or they have problems with the graphics or social media graphics. Is this something you do? And then you would have a meaningful conversation thanks to the name that you both know.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Another thing that I wanted to ask about, well, now that you've brought up LinkedIn groups, because a lot of people say, to do that kind of same thing, but with Facebook groups. But I'm wondering if LinkedIn groups would be a better approach because they're more business oriented usually.
I don't mean to badmouth Facebook groups. They have their place. You could actually use LinkedIn groups differently. Across LinkedIn groups, most people tend not to share and not to comment and not to like, just consume content. But there are many ways to leverage groups. Let's just mention one example. If you run a search for podcasting groups and you found one particularly interesting group that has, 200 members. Now, 200 members are not a lot, so it's not worth your while, Sarah, going to that group and sharing a lot of content because, maybe 3 or 5 or 10 would actually do something with it. But what you could do, because it's a small group, is go over all 200 names, or just 50 names, and find 3 interesting prospects. And in that case, your outreach would not be using the group at all. It would be either asking someone to be introduced or visiting their profile publicly or following them or commenting or something they did. And that's possible even if the group has 200 people, 100 people, 400 people, because the larger groups tend to be very crowded. If you visit a podcasting group with 20K, then many service providers would push up content there, and it would be difficult for you to actually stand out. But the smaller groups are interesting because they enable you to see a list of names and to decide that these are the people you'd like to reach out to, not necessarily using the group.
That makes sense. And when you say to view someone's page publicly, what do you mean by that?
LinkedIn enables users to have their 3 levels of visiting people's profile. One would have their name, so let's say your name. The third would be anonymous LinkedIn user. And there's something in between, something that is right for you, but also for other people. It could be someone from Dallas area or someone who went to this particular school or this particular college. If LinkedIn users choose the public setting, that means they get to see up to 5 people who visited their profile without paying LinkedIn. They would appear as one person, namely they would see Sarah St. John, they would see John Doe when they visit someone's profile. So you don't have to pay LinkedIn, and if you visit who's viewed your profile, say twice a week, you would see that some names would change. Maggie would replace Renee, and then you would actually see interesting people, and that also enables you to reach out to them if you'd like.
So how do you make sure that it's on that public setting?
I'll just try to share my screen, and I'll try to describe it as we go. So on the top navigation bar on desktop, you would see a small thumbnail of your image, and right now we go to settings and privacy. Once we've hit settings and privacy, we click on visibility in the lower column, and then profile viewing options. That's it. 3 settings. One is with your name, full name. The third is anonymous. The second is something that is right for you and also for other people. So if people listening to us would be here, I would advise them to go and make sure their full name is listed. And from that second, they would be able to go to their profile, to their homepage, and see who visited their profile. Your thumbnail, settings and privacy, visibility, profile viewing options, select the top one.
So is that when you see notifications that someone at whatever viewed your profile, but it doesn't give their name or anything, is that because they have their settings that way?
Often, yes. So it builds on a FOMO feeling. Who could that person be? It's not worth paying LinkedIn until we become very heavy users. Even if someone had limited budget, by paying for a premium account, they would get something, but they would not be able to actually appreciate it. It's only when we see the limits of the free account, and the free account, LinkedIn is so overwhelming, most people don't use more than 10% of its free capabilities.
There's already so many capabilities that you've pointed out that I didn't even know about. So
thank you very much. Time has to be, if entrepreneurs take some time to study LinkedIn, under the hood, it's a very powerful engine. It's mind-blowing. But most people just treat it more casual way.
So those are some good ways for me to find people who already have a podcast. Is there really any way of finding people who are thinking about starting a podcast? I don't know how you would even necessarily find what you could possibly search, or that's where because I want to do a lot of launching of podcasts as well.
We can only access what the LinkedIn algorithm finds on people's actions and profiles. So there may be, thousands of people out there who start thinking about podcasts but don't reflect it necessarily on their LinkedIn profile. One way to do it is to look for specific groups saying starting with podcasting or easy podcasting or first steps in podcasting, something that would cater to someone who starts thinking about podcasting, and people who have joined that group could be contemplating the idea without having recorded or published a single episode. Another thing you could do is there's a way for you to define a search on LinkedIn, some sort of advanced search. Let's say you're looking for people with the word podcast and host, and say in the state of Texas, and you found, say, 700 people. If you look those 700 people up and you say they're interesting for Podscene, you could actually ask LinkedIn to save that search using a free account and have LinkedIn check that every week. Now, what would happen if you have 700 results now? Maybe in 2 weeks' time, you'll have 705 people or 710 people. Now, where would those people be? They only just updated their own profile using the word podcast. Some of them would actually start producing the podcast. Maybe that could be a good angle for you to reach out to them or to see who they are, because it's new. It wasn't there when you ran the first search, and LinkedIn could think of it as Google Alerts on steroids. When someone starts adding the word podcast, it meets other criteria, location, or anything you'd like, then is the good time for you to get notified.
That helps. One thing I wanted to ask about, there's different tools out there that I guess kind of do some of this on the back end or streamline it, or Link Help or Linvo. There's a few of them. What is your opinion on things like that?
We have to take into account that LinkedIn hunts down and closes many automation services out there gradually. So eventually, most automation services will be either limited by LinkedIn's API or by some other mechanism LinkedIn has. LinkedIn does not appreciate and does not endorse, and actually the user agreement we sign up say that we're not allowed to use any automation at all. And LinkedIn keeps adding additional layers of limitation. You can no longer send hundreds of invitations to connect on any given week. LinkedIn found out that some bots are doing this, and now you're limited to probably 100 or 90. So every time some automation comes and offers ways for LinkedIn users to perform actions automatically, there's a risk of LinkedIn not only shutting down the access, but actually restricting our profile. And that could be a major disadvantage. It means you could no longer send invitations to people. You would be locked out. It could be frightening. You do not need to use automations at all. Initially, I don't think it's a wise step.
Well, that's helpful to know, because I don't know if you're familiar with AppSumo.
Yeah.
It's like a marketplace that they have a few different software tools on there right now for a one-time fee of $80 or whatever. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. And I was actually thinking about buying one, but now you've convinced me not to do that.
I'm a great AppSumo fan, and I happen to have read they were looking for a CEO.
I think they're offering someone $100,000 if you find their next CEO. Now, are they actually looking for a new CEO? Is Noah Kagan leaving the company?
Noah published a video saying that the company he founded went from, I don't remember the figure, still say 10 million. And now the current CEO suggested they needed someone else to take the company for the multi-billion-dollar industry. So Noah will stay there.
Oh, so Noah, okay, so he's not the CEO then. I guess he's just the founder or something.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. Okay, well, it's good to know that he's not leaving. I didn't want him to leave. I think that the last question I have, it was on your website about the foul-proof formula to attract ideal clients. I was wondering if you could go over that.
When you consider the ideal client you'd like to reach, we have to have a system based on our LinkedIn presence, our connection strategy, our content strategy, and our prospecting strategy. We touch on nuggets of at least one or two of them, but I would go and make sure that my LinkedIn profile, my LinkedIn presence is excellent in the eyes of my ideal readers. So specifically podcasters starting out or who could struggle with some parts of the podcast venture, they should look at your profile and within 5 seconds say, hey, I need to reach out to Sarah. And there are many obstacles right now. If someone visited your profile, not making it easy for them to actually reach out. Let me show you an example. What would you like people to do when they visit your own profile? Eventually, after they read your profile, what would you like them to do?
Well, either go to podseam.com or check out the podcast for Frugalpreneur.
Okay. Would you like them to see any contact info on your profile, on your LinkedIn profile?
Yes,
So let me run a very quick share screen here and maybe we'll touch on that. I'm visiting your profile and say you now added links and the banner is the new image and everything works fine. And now I want to reach out to you. So many LinkedIn users would simply click on contact info. What would you like them to see here, Sarah?
Let's see. I guess there's not a way to do a form necessarily. So I guess just my email address.
Okay. Do you think we will see your email?
I don't know. I'm curious now.
When I visit your contact info now, I don't see any email, any visible email. Maybe we could perform a quick action here. If you're okay with having an email shown, then there's another setting for you to actually click. Okay? I'll show it again on my end. We go to the settings and privacy, which we're now familiar with here. Settings and privacy. And in that page, we click on sign in and security and pick the fourth who can see or download your email address. Now, if you're performing the action now, my guess is that what you would see, Sarah, is only first degree connection. You change it to first and second or anyone on LinkedIn. That means that from now, anyone visiting your profile and clicking on contact info, even without being connected to you, they would be able to see your email. And then there's a second layer of connection strategy. Most people don't have one, so most people react. So I got an invitation, I'm looking it up, and I decide whether I accept or not. There is one way to go, which is quality. Only people I really know. There's an exposure angle saying I want to have 30,000 connections, but most people hesitate. In fact, most entrepreneurs start with the quality approach, only connecting with people they know well. Then at one point they think they need to reach some exposure and they start looking at the other way without having actually any exposure. Because 2,000 connections on LinkedIn don't give you a lot of exposure. So if you're in the middle, you don't have enough exposure, and you've actually polluted your chances of being introduced to the ideal client you have. So just pick one. On top of that, there's connection, content strategy, and something else. But that's how we would actually start. And as long as we decide if we're happy with quantity or a quality approach, we have more control. Because if I look you up and I see two mutual connections, LinkedIn doesn't show me, this one Sarah really knows well, and the other lady, she doesn't really know that much. So it's just like the profile has to be self-sufficient, if you like. Our connections should also speak for ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wow. You've shared so much. I feel like I've learned so much in this past hour that a bunch of things I'm going to have to do after this. That's awesome. Well, were there any last words or things that we didn't touch on that you wanted to go over?
I think it might even be overwhelming what we've discussed. So I would start by looking at anyone listening to us. I would advise them to go to their profile and think about the ideal reader and just say, if I were my ideal reader, would I feel compelled to reach out to that person? And after that is done, then we can think of a lot of other things. But this is the first action I think entrepreneurs should consider.
Yeah, and if people want to learn more about you, they can go to danielalfon.com. That's ALFON. I'll also have show notes at thesarahstjohn.com/Daniel Alfon. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Be sure to grab your free copy of my list of 27 tools, resources, and software programs I use to run my businesses on a tight budget. You can get it at thesarahstjohn.com/27 tools. That's THESARAHSTJOHN.com/27 tools.